Joep.
Thank you for butchering my name.
So Joep, and yes, and with a surname probably. I can try, yes?
Yes, I'd like you to see.
Piscaer?
Almost, Piscaer.
Piscaer, oh yes. Joep Piscaer.
All right,
Round of applause.
All right. So thanks for inviting me. Thank you for being here and not in an open space. Just as a reminder, the open spaces are back here and over there. So if you do want to leave, the rules of open space do apply to my talk as well. If you don't find it interesting, the door is that way. You can just leave. I won't be offended. Well, maybe a little bit. I'm going to tell a fairy tale. I'm not going to talk about anything realistic. Like this lady, you might lose your shoe at midnight, but it's due to tequila. So this is not a real story. It's fantasy. I've made it up, but it does come from a couple of different companies I've worked at. I've seen this do, but I've kind of mushed it together into one big fairy tale. And I've added some concrete examples where I can, just to make sure that you get the story. And I would be really happy if you just take home one or two things that I talk about today and implement it within your own organization. So my name is Joep. I am a technical pathfinder at Jumbo. Jumbo is a big supermarket in the Netherlands. We are trying to create a tech startup within the company. So we're trying to be a tech company. We're doing the e-commerce platform. Obviously, that means hiring lots and lots of developers. Developers have kind of an expectation of how to work and how the organization works and what it looks like. And that's for a large part my job, to make sure the organization is there to support the developers. One of the coolest things about working there, though, is my title, Technical Pathfinder. I don't know, I like that title so much. And again, this is just, imaginary. And I want to start off with looking at a couple of concepts and how they apply to organizations. So I want to look at autonomy, flow, and simplicity within an organization, and that solves inertia of team culture, finance, and of course, technology and infrastructure. So I want to start out by this animation. So the person falling there, that's us, DevOps, developers, and the rest of the organization kind of lags behind, right? So we're going at a good pace, but the rest of the organization just doesn't want to move with us. So that's inertia, right? The leaves all around you, the stuff all around you that doesn't want to move, that's the organization around us. That's not us, obviously, right? So who recognizes that picture? You want to go fast, but you're really, you're held back by the rest of the organization, right? Everybody, probably. So I want to look at a couple of concepts that make the organization around you inert, so it doesn't want to move, or the other way around, that it does want to move. And remember, this is a fairy tale, so this is not realistic. This is to the extreme, right? This is how it should be done, but it is never done this way in the end, because it's just, not real. So autonomous and multidisciplinary teams, they independently develop and release into production. They have their own little thing, their software product, their software feature, that they are responsible for. And they have everything within that team to accomplish that goal. They have developers, they have testers, they have DevOps people or system admins. They might have some people from the business that actually understand why we're doing this. And they don't hide behind this cultural inertia, right? Hiding behind defense mechanism. No, we finished this product last week and it was really good. Like, here's the report saying so. This team actually owns whatever they do, good or bad. And they don't use excuses like, no, the other team had to fix this. No, they own it. If it's horrible, then that's fine, that happens too. And most of the time they operate outside of their comfort zone. So they'll have a comfort zone, like Monday morning, coming into work, they'll be in their comfort zone, right? But during the week, during the sprint, they'll do stuff they haven't done before. They're learning, they're engaging, they're discussing how to do this in the best way. And what makes it special is they're responsible for what's called a business outcome and not a business function. So I used to work in IT for a long time. I was a sysadmin, I was an architect, I was a consultant. And that's a business function, a process you do to make the business better. And autonomous and multidisciplinary teams are really about an outcome. They develop some kind of feature that helps customers in a very direct way. And that's one of the key differences. You work on something the customer wants or the customer uses. You're actually deploying something into production instead of just doing finances or doing IT or doing whatever, patching Windows systems. But that means aligning systems along a organizational boundary. So a boundary can be a team, a boundary can be a group of teams, a boundary can be an entire group of teams. But the point there is they take ownership of that system and they break down dependencies so that that single team or that group of teams can own a system completely. Again, to prevent people saying, yeah, but it's their problem. That wasn't us, that wasn't me, but those guys screwed up. And that requires loose coupling. It requires breaking down those dependencies so that you can actually be independent of the rest. And how many people here have heard of Conway's law? Right? So one of the tricks I learned is not seeing it as a negative thing, like, okay, software turns out how you form your organization, but actually the other way around. So you can actually organize yourself in such a way that you produce software that you want to have. Right? So organize your teams in such a way that you're producing code and features that you want to actually, want to have in your customers' hands. Right? So take advantage of it. Don't think of it as a negative thing. Think of it as a good thing. And you can choose which of these 6 you actually like. I like the Microsoft one with the guns, but that's personal. But take advantage of it. In other words, think about which teams do I need to accomplish what goal. I need a goal. Okay, I got to start thinking about, okay, I want to do an e-commerce site. I've got to have a backend. Okay, I need backend teams that are responsible for this feature or that software product. So you have to actually think about it. And again, this is ideal, right? Usually these teams in the organizational structure grows over time. But once in a while, it's good to actually see and think, okay, I want to have this outcome. I'm going to create a team around it. And you have to organize in cherries. So this is one of the tricks my boss taught me, is create these cells and align them to technical domains, right? So have a product owner and a team lead, and multiple Scrum teams. There's 2 pictured, but it can be 3, it can be 1, it can be 4. And align them with the technical systems on the back end. And teams will naturally kind of mold together if there's a reason to do so. So if they're adjacent to some kind of technology, they'll form tribes. But really, this is the building block of an organization, of an agile organization. And they'll work on similar issues and solve them together to have some kind of efficiency, not reinvent the wheel every time. And these teams are small. These are 5 to 8, maybe 10 people, but not much smaller. You want them to be able to flip an opinion, right? They'll have an opinion about this, and you have to react to changes. So if the group becomes too big, the opinion of the group will never effectively change, or it won't happen soon enough. And for simplicity's sake, please just do by the book Scrum, right? Don't reinvent the wheel in terms of Scrum or Agile or the methodology you take. So all of that talk about ownership gives a certain freedom, and it gives freedom in the perspective of a bottom-up choice. So again, I worked in IT, right? I was the guy that built infrastructure and then said to developers, you have to use this. For the next 3 years or the next 4 years, you have to use this infrastructure. And nobody was happy about that. Of course they're not, because they cannot make a choice. So this freedom I'm talking about gives development groups an independent bottom-up choice. From a central IT perspective, we're not forcing anything upon them, right? Not infrastructure, not software, not tooling, not processes, not ITIL or ITSM. Choose your own. And that creates a freedom that each team can choose differently, right? So one of the questions I get a lot in my work, as a technical pathfinder, so I'm responsible for infrastructure, right? Cloud, the DevOps way of work, infrastructure. And people come up to me and say, okay, what kind of cloud do I need to use? Is it Google? Is it Microsoft? Is it Amazon? Which one do we need? And I say, oh, well, choose your own. Okay, but how do we choose? There's so much to choose, it's so difficult. So now I can help you, right? And the beauty of it, teams can actually decide on their own. And it's my role to guide teams and help them and make that decision, or change that opinion if that's what's needed. But that freedom really is one of the key constructs of my talk here, to let teams decide on their own and make mistakes on their own, and correct those mistakes if that's relevant for them. And so instead of using that infrastructure that your central IT forces upon you, you can use your own infrastructure. You can choose it, and usually that'll be some kind of cloud, right? That's going to be something that's low friction, that is easily part of your pipeline. You can integrate it. It has APIs. It integrates into your tooling. It's self-service. You don't need to call someone, okay, I need a VM right now, or a physical server, or a piece of storage, or whatever. So it's ready to use, ready to consume. Payment is pretty easy, although I have seen cases where payment becomes an issue, where a credit card is suddenly blocked and your infrastructure goes down, but that's a different story. But it's really easy to consume that stuff. It's really easy to just turn it on, start using it. So development teams, of course, have a preference for low friction infrastructure, and that almost always means public cloud. And for software, kind of the same story, right? Where applicable, you're going to use something that's commodity off the shelf, so COTS, commodity off the shelf, something that you can buy. And then you're going to consume it, hopefully in a standard way, without customizing it too much. You're going to use it as intended. And if you are going to customize it, you're going to do so in a way that doesn't really hurt the product that you're using. So if you want to do an upgrade in 2 years, right? I've seen so many software projects go from, okay, we can upgrade in a week, to a scenario where 2 years later, nothing is really done because it's so hard to upgrade. It becomes so difficult to separate the standard application and the customized code on top of it. And so, the other decision is develop it completely in-house, do a custom application. And that's a fine choice too. Whatever gives the lowest friction to deliver what you as a team want to or need to deliver, that's fine. You can go either way. And then the thing I've been thinking about so much in this ideal picture, this fairy tale that doesn't ever happen, where cloud and infrastructure expertise are actually integral part of the value stream or the team. So it's not something you have to request. It's not something that you need to wait for months or weeks for. It isn't the biggest bottleneck anymore. It is something you can just consume, just start using. And those people, even those infrastructure engineers, cloud engineers, DevOps engineers, whatever you call them, can now work on adding business value instead of doing some kind of business function, right? So they're going to work on automation instead of trying to get a vendor to actually sell you servers or install them in a data center or stuff like that. And so suddenly, unfit infrastructure, wasteful handovers between central IT and the development team, bureaucratic ticketing systems in between, all that stuff are suddenly annihilated. They don't exist anymore because you are organizing it yourself. You're doing it yourself within a team. And that makes for a much smaller and much more nimble process. So as an example, this is getting a letter or a flyer to someone. This is a couple of small steps, nothing really fancy. But for software, it's basically the same. Or for consuming an infrastructure, it is basically the same. So instead of having this big bulk of stuff that you need to process, like building a data center and installing an hypervisor, installing software on top of it, no, you just consume whatever you need. And that makes for a shorter feedback cycle with immediate results, immediate feedback. So if you, in this example, if you fold it wrong, then you know immediately, right? So you've got one error instead of 100 because you started folding first 100 letters and then moving on to the next step. So you have minimal work in progress, no code waiting to go into production, and nothing stuck in the pipeline. One of the things I see often is teams working pretty optimal. They're producing code, gets reviewed, gets it gets pushed to production, but it is not actually deployed onto the production environment. And the added thing of thinking small in this sense is you don't have anything that you don't use left over. So unused artifacts like management reports or stuff that gets built but it doesn't need to go into production. You can actually optimize for that, and that makes for a developer that can focus very specifically on the thing at hand, and it creates a smaller pipeline for the developer. But this doesn't make sense everywhere. So there's examples where this does work. This works for e-commerce. This works for releasing software for a website. But this doesn't really work that well. I don't know, for Oracle or for SAP systems, or stuff that's in the core of what your organization does. That's still, even in this ideal picture, I don't really have solutions for this. But we are getting there at the company I work for. And so if you are pushing it to production, the same team is responsible for all of the operational aspects. So maintenance, errors, bugs in production because the system goes down. And that gives an incentive to actually test your code before you release it, right? So if you're not responsible for the thing in production, you're not responsible for the actual operation, then you don't have an incentive to test your code or to make sure the quality of that code is up to speed, or that it's secure, or that it's fast. So if you make the team responsible, then you start taking steps towards, okay, I'm writing this code, I gotta fix this in production later on too. So people are gonna write better code, and they're incentivized to actually work on the tool chain to make sure the thing that goes into production is of higher quality. And then expertise in chapters. So, my role is a pathfinder, which is basically the lead of a chapter, but that makes sure that we have, experts in a given field. So I'm an expert in infrastructure, I know all about that specific area. And I am able to train and help people within my organization that are not part of my own team, but are part of development teams, to be the best infrastructure engineer they can be, right? So we've at Jumbo drawn it very specifically this way. So on the left side, we have the pathfinders, which you can see as chapter leads. And we take care of, a couple of the expertises in our team. So we have a Scrum coach, we have an analyst pathfinder, we have someone for UX design, we have someone for test, infrastructure and security. And that makes sure that, across all of the teams we have, I think it's about 30 already, we make sure that, all of the infrastructure engineers are actually working in the best way they can, and they have some way of standardizing what they're doing. And on the other hand, on the top we have the actual development teams and the development leads on top of it, and those are the people that go into the more soft skills. So team lead is HR responsible. They'll do the appraisals, they'll do the more softer coaching, and then we have the pathfinders in sort of that matrix organization that gravitate towards the harder skills. So I actually teach people about cloud and infrastructure and DevOps, and that's my mission within the company. I don't develop code, I don't release code into production. I make sure code can be released into production in the most efficient way, because I care about DevOps and cloud and stuff like that. So the pathfinders, or the chapter leads, are a key technical role within our organization to make sure that all of those different expertises in different Scrum teams actually have someone to talk with, to help them if there's problems. And we also lead in the bigger initiatives, right? So if for instance, we need to move everything from an on-prem environment to a cloud environment, then that's something that the Pathfinders will initiate, will guide, will help, because that's too big for one Scrum team to do. And again, for most Scrum teams, that's not their actual mission. Their mission is to get a feature produced and deployed to production. So that way we kind of separate out the maintenance and the housekeeping we need to do, even if it's a bigger project, from the actual production work. And then this is the thing that makes it a real fairy tale for me. So in my mind, I've been thinking about central IT. Central IT in this ideal picture that will never ever happen anywhere in the world, but I'd like it to be sometime, at some point, at some organization. I want IT to be a guild. So not a business function, not a department within your company, but just a group of people that care about this stuff, that know about this stuff, and standardize it for the rest. And so this group of people, throughout the organization will manage, and this is what I call the collection of connected simplicities, or architecture. But if you have enough people in enough different areas of your organization caring for different parts of the infrastructure or the technology stack as a whole, then that's a function of architecture. It won't be top-down architecture like many of us are used to, but still it serves the same function. It protects against making stupid decisions on your own. It protects against going in a different direction than we've all agreed upon. And while that group is together in a centralized guild, we can help teams consume cloud resources, right? So in very simple terms, make sure that everything we do in AWS is, every tenant in AWS is attached to our Okta deployment, or does standardized logging to Splunk, or et cetera, et cetera. All of these things developers don't really want to care about. You can standardize, move away from the teams, and kind of introduce as a responsibility into these guilds. And central IT is an example I think I've been thinking about a lot, but this can apply to finances as well, right? So why not combine a lot of people within the organization in a guild, and they can buy software together or buy hardware together if that's what you need. So instead of having a central department that does it for you and tells you what you're going to need, you can actually group amongst yourselves and then make those decisions. So finally, I want to make sure that you pick one or two of these and take them with you. Discuss them, think about them. These are the points that I think will make the difference in having an organization that's inert, doesn't want to move. Again, the leaves around you. Pick one or two and you'll notice small things will start to change. Small things will start to move. And if that happens, you can then pick one or two more. So this is not something you need to do, in one go as a whole. But again, pick one, pick two, pick whatever suits you right now in your organization. So with that, tweet me your fairy tale story if you have one. Take a picture of this, discuss this with me on Twitter if you like. I'll be here all day, I'll be here tomorrow as well. See if you have any questions you want to disagree with me. I like disagreeing, but with a beer, please, so we can make it something we start on disagreeing and then we'll agree at some point. And at some point we'll maybe hug or be best friends. I don't know. So thank you for your attention and have a good day.
Thank you, Joep, for your speech. Does anyone has any questions? Okay, no questions.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify about this Pathfinder. I have never heard about this.
No.
Is it like a technical architect, or it's quite different, like a role? Can you somehow compare?
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, how does it compare to being an architect?
Yeah, technical architect, like.
Yeah, a technical architect. So, you know, on the one hand, it does compare because you are the person that oversees all of the activities, all of the technical choices, and you try to guide them in a standardized way. You want to prevent people making kind of random decisions. But on the other hand, no, it's not an architect in a top-down fashion, right? The architect that I'm used to will set standards and tell everyone or shout at everyone, okay, this is the way we're going to do it because I've thought of it and the business really needs this. So it's really rigid, right? An architect in my mind is really rigid, makes plans once a year, and then people will, you know, do that for a year and then change plans. So what I want to change with this role is, again, this role is also very top-down. An architect is, bottom-up. So my role is bottom-up. So instead of forcing people to do what I want, I'll help people make the right decision. That gives me the flexibility as well to change opinions because, you know, IT is moving so fast, insights can change, decisions have to change because business changes. So this is a more flexible approach, I think, to architecture. And it has many of the same advantages, but cuts away a couple of those top-down disadvantages.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions?
Is there any question? Oh, yep.
I mean, when board is used, and upper management is used to decisions that we do it like that, and,
yes.
and how do you think, how do you can convince the board to change its mind that like small team can make their own decision how to spend money? We don't need that bunch of hardware. We would like to start in that public cloud. Let's see how it goes. Don't spend big money and afterwards switch to whatever we need because we actually understand what we need in the process. We can't agree of what amount of hardware we need, what to invest, and we don't want to spend so much money at the beginning because we don't know if we actually will need and we'll get the right hardware. Yeah. How do you convince the upper management and board on that?
So that's a really difficult question to answer because I don't know your board, right? I don't know your upper management. So I have two answers. So in my case, my upper management was already convinced, and then we started doing this as a group. And that was true, or that is true, because our upper management really believes in Agile and the Scrum way of working. So a lot of the things I'm actually talking about are an implementation of doing Scrum or doing Agile. And I'd recommend taking a similar approach. So don't think you have to convince your upper management to do this completely for your entire environment right now, right? Don't migrate everything to the public cloud at once, but start small. Think about the smallest step you can take next week or within a couple of weeks that can start showing your upper management that this works, right? So maybe for a new project, don't buy new hardware, but use public cloud. Or in terms of the organizational structure, don't do a big bang and change all of the organizational structure at once, but start with a very small team because you have a project running or you have some kind of business need to do this. So the main point is start with the smallest thing you can think of that you can actually do within, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. All right, and see me after because I know you disagree. I see it. All right, I think my time is already really up, so I'm gonna leave it at that. And
you have time for one more question. We're still waiting for the next speaker, so
nice,
go for it if
That's
everyone
good.
has one.
Any more questions?
Yep.
Do you have experience selling this autonomous responsibility stuff to information security officers?
Yes.
Like how to do it?
I don't have a good answer to that.
Because they tend to like restrict everything and
Yes.
and stop business.
Yes, so again, my answer is basically the same. You're not going to convince them to do it different, in a completely different way from the start. Find something that is relevant to them right now. So maybe your CISO is really struggling with a cloud onboarding project right now. Make sure you take away a little bit of his or her work instead of leaving it at their side. So think about how can I help them with the smallest step possible to make sure we can start on this journey together.
Thank you.
Andrew, maybe you're here and I just didn't notice you.
So the question is here Andrew Martin? If he is, he's hiding and he's doing this really well. But what I wanted to say, thank you to you.
Thank you. Awesome.